G'day guys, Gordon from Blue Tongue Industries. I want to go over the Comet P40 used in soft washing, and I wanted to show you how to install an overhaul service kit. I'll drop links below, and I just wanted to run you through the whole process. It's not daunting. Like anything, you do it one time, it'll be easy going thereafter. But in saying that, it's a very infrequent requirement, and the reliability of these things, some of the P40s are up to 4 years old here in Australia, and the serviceability compared to various other systems, whether 12 volt, 24 volt or electric, are super reliable. They're running at 290 PSI and just under the 40 litres a minute. So they pack a punch, and if you've seen in some of our videos, you'll see the ferocity of the output of this particular system. So an online service kit, and in that service kit there is 6 valves. So the poppet valves allow water flow, and when we inspect a poppet valve, we should be able to inspect the seat, and you'll have to get a screwdriver and push the seat down and look at the seat. But when we fill a valve up with water, and this is just water in this syringe, and we fill it up, we shouldn't get any leakage. So that metal on metal seat is allowing flow and preventing flow and operating as it should as the pistons in the pump rotate. So that's one little good trick of the trade, but that can be visually looked at in the valves that you pull out of the kit. So there are 6 valves. The diaphragms are quite substantial. So when we look at the diaphragms, the thickness of those is probably more than 5 mil. They do have I'm not sure if you'll see that, but an oil side and then a water side. So they need to be put back in the right configuration. And then there's O-rings that go around the poppet valves. So all in a kit, and that's what you'll get in a kit. And let's run through this seal replacement in this Comet P40. So just a bit of an overview. Let's go through the various components on this particular Comet pump. So we have our flow regulator. So that will adjust the flow and pressure on the pump. So similar to an unloader valve and an adjustable unloader valve on a pressure cleaner. The outlet of the pump, which is running to our hose reel, we like to install a 300 PSI check valve. So that's going to alleviate pressure going back into the pump. The inlet of the pump over this side is coming from our proportioner, so quite a large inlet. Different size barbs, we can get inch and a quarter, so various configurations. So the oil sight gauge. So on this particular unit we had a fault, and we had oil that even after an oil change was coming up at that particular colour. So there's water ingress in that oil, and I wanted to show you, and I'll go through the actual fault on this particular system. It was actually a super quick fix and a great find. So the oil sight gauge, there's a couple of different various configurations on this depending on the generation of your P40. We'll sit here, oil level indicator. It does take a 30 weight non-detergent oil. So we need to use non-detergent so it doesn't foam. So that is very important. I'll drop links below for the part numbers of that as well. Each piston head, so it's a 3-piston system like a radial engine on an aircraft, and there's a crankshaft with 3 individual pistons. A bit unusual on this one, we've actually got the reduction gearbox in parts, and I've left this in parts just to show you the makeup of this. So when we do an oil check on the reduction gearbox, and there's 7 bolts that are holding this reduction gearbox on, it's spigoted, so it only goes in one way. We fill it to a level where oil runs out of a lock-off bolt. So it doesn't have a mechanical dipstick like a piston engine, but we fill it with oil until we get oil flow, like filling a diff, oil flow out of the bolt. But on this particular system, I wanted to show you the gearbox arrangement. So to remove the pump assembly from the piston engine, whether depending on what you're running, a Honda or very, very similar, it's a matter of undoing the 4 attachment bolts that hold the engine in place. And if I can just re-engage that to show you exactly where it would normally sit, like that. So there's 4 attachment bolts which attach to, on this case we've got a Honda GX200. We had a bit of an unusual situation on this particular one where the centre drive gear was actually, whether it's burred on the shaft, but we had great difficulty in pulling this P40 off the engine shaft. So we actually split the gearbox, and that's why it is split, to remove it. And the gearbox, well, the shaft is actually held in place with a circlip. So it was an unusual to see this separated, but going back on will be a bit different. But I just wanted to show you why I've got this off, how the oil level on the P40 works, and filling up to that particular bolt, the oil level would be somewhere to a height of that, with all the gears submerged. So that's a bit of a sidetrack, bit of an overview, but great to see. So what we're going to do now is go ahead, and all 3 cylinders are the same, and we'll carry out, I'll show you how to replace the diaphragm in 1 cylinder. The other 3 will be the same, and we'll just work on that. We'll get some tools together. So first up, we're just going to remove the flow regulator. So as I said previously, this can be, well, it can control the pressure, and it does control the pressure of the P40, like a pressure cleaner with an adjustable unloader valve. So just removing these 3 Phillip head screws. So like a pressure cleaner in a closed loop system, not running back to a water tank, the P40, if you didn't know, has a runaround bypass circuit. We often say about 10 metres of hose, and so the outlet side, like on a closed loop pressure cleaner, if it's not going to the tank, does a 10-metre loop, and on a proportion system goes back to the manifold. So when you release your hand off the trigger, pressure is discharged from this outlet port, runs through the proportioner, is using that 10 metres of hose as a heat sink. So we'll just remove the flow regulator and put that aside. A couple of O-rings to keep the water inside, and is quite a simple piece of kit. So we're going to now expose the poppet valves. So a 13mm socket, and we'll fly around. Now the bolts on this end housing, there's a couple of different lengths, and it would be reasonably hard to get that wrong, but it's just something to take note that the 2 centre bolts are shorter than the 2 outside bolts. So it's pretty hard to get that wrong, as I say, but just to take note. As we take the manifold off, we're going to expose the poppet valves. So the O-rings for each particular cylinder, which each piston has an in-out, the O-rings around those cylinders actually mate in that particular surface there. So the O-rings there are part of the kit, and the valves below this are also part of the kit. So there's a stainless steel sleeve and a plastic sleeve. So just take note on how those particular units sit. If we put those aside, we can pull a valve out, and each of those valves do come as part of the kit. And it's as simple as reseating those valves back in place and installing the respective stainless steel sleeve or the plastic sleeve on either side. Yeah, just to show you another close-up. So we have our stainless steel cylinder or sleeve. We can pull out each poppet valve with either inspect, do a water test, look at the seat, or replace. So they'll simply go back in situ with our O-ring. On the other side we have a plastic insert sleeve, and the poppet valve here can sometimes be, because they're installed the other way around, but of same configuration. So we inspect that, look at the seat, do a water test, and good to go. We're going to now expose one of 3 cylinders. They're all the same. I'll just run you through this one to show you how to get access to and replace the diaphragm. So 13mm, all these bolts on top are the same. So changing the oil and carrying out a regular maintenance check on your P40 pump, the dilemma or the drama is getting all the air out of the oil. There is a few tricks. On the bottom of the unit itself there is a drain plug, and if you have a capture tank you'd be able to remove the oil from that part of the sump, but you'll find getting all the oil out is often quite hard because it's multi-chamber. The 4 bolts, when the gearbox is installed, if you pull the drain plug, you're able to rock the motor or the pump left and right to be able to disperse all the oil. Using a vacuum oil pump still doesn't allow you with the galleries to get inside the pump, so it does take a bit of finesse, but having the right drip tray, removing these 4 bolts and just rocking the pump back and forth will allow you to get all the oil out. And a 30 weight non-detergent oil is an absolute must. So we've removed all those bolts from the top of each cylinder head. We can see there's an arrow fluid out and fluid in, just for reference. And we can take the cylinder head off. So each cylinder head is a fixed cylinder head. There are dowels which relocate each cylinder head onto the cylinder body. So also take note of those. You can mark things as you go along where each cylinder head does go in relation to the engine body. We'll put that aside. You'll need a 3/4 spanner to undo the centre piston bolt. Now these bolts I find should be low strength medium Loctite, and in this particular P40 Comet pump we did have a fault with oil and a water mix, and you can see the discoloration of that oil there, but we actually found that one of the bolts had come adrift. So that's good to take note of. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a ruptured diaphragm. These diaphragms are, as you can see, are super thick. So we had a bolt that had unscrewed and was allowing water to enter underneath this seal and enter into the oil. So when we pull this apart, we're going to clean it up with some contact cleaner. We're going to remove all the dirty oil and water residue from the cylinder and from the pump body, and we're going to fill it up with fresh oil. So that is to take note. We're going to clean the threads, and we're going to use a medium strength Loctite to put these back in situ. So each diaphragm itself has the water side and then the oil side, the oil side being inside the gearbox. So we can, in this case, rotate the piston, and you'll see as I rotate the gear, and if I hadn't separated the gearbox we'd be able to rotate the shaft, but you can see the piston assembly moving up and down. So what that actually does is when we have the piston bolt back in and we move the piston, it moves the centre of the diaphragm up and down. That causes a pulsation, and that's basically how the diaphragm pump works. So we'll put that aside. We'll inspect the diaphragms, but in this case everything has inspected serviceable, and we're just going to give it a good clean up and re-Loctite the particular piston bolt back in, and Bob's your uncle. But if we had to go further, and we can move that around, we need to remove each piston cylinder, and the best way to do that is I use a podger. So that's like a cylinder lining that encapsulates and allows the piston to run in. So like a cylinder of an engine. That's often honed, but on this particular one there are two, and if you can see there are two holes in the side. Now what I actually did there, you can use your finger pressure to manipulate that and pop that. I actually had a podger into that hole in the side, and I was actually just able to pull that cylinder out of the way. So looking inside the gearbox, we have a piston, we have a cylinder ring, and as I rotate the gear shaft on the end, the piston will go up and down. So it's just a 3-crank system, and quite simple in design and very, very robust. So once we strip the whole unit, clean it all out, use an air pencil, get rid of any residual moisture, we're going to then fill the unit back up with oil. So it's way easier now to fill the unit in this configuration rather than try and separate all the air and remove all the air out of the system and get a true oil level. So we've just gone through a cleanup and inspection process, laid everything out and cleaned each component individually. But I'll just show you the last cylinder head that I am doing and cleaning up and inspecting. So we went over the stainless steel sleeve and the plastic insert, the two O-rings which come part of the kit, and each individual poppet valve. So we'll take them out, water out in direction of flow, so you can sort of work out which way. I don't think, well, you wouldn't be able to reinsert in an opposite direction, because each insert is a different depth, and if I can get this one out, usually they fall out. So I think it would be quite hard to install differently. So the direction of water in is against the poppet valve. So we're going to inspect the O-rings. There's two O-rings that don't come part of the kit, so take note of that. We're going to depress each plunger under some good light, look at each seat and do the water test. So why would you go through this particular process? So if, for example, we are losing pressure on the pump, and you've had a dramatic decrease in pressure, it's possibly that one of the poppet valves has got some debris in it or damaged, so that's one particular reason. Or if your oil level is changed dramatically because it's got water ingress and your oil level is building up. So that's two reasons that you would probably go through this, and probably the third is if you had a leak or a cracked component. But we'll go for a reassembly. Seat the diaphragm all the way around. We're just using a 243 medium strength Loctite. So we have degreased all the areas. Just going to apply Loctite to the threads. That's going to prevent that centre bolt coming undone. A 3/4 socket, and that is also a oil water seal. So the polyethylene gasket or sealing ring is actually sealing against the diaphragm, so as the piston moves up and down you can see the pulsation there in that particular unit. So that's seated. So we've just installed the cylinder head over the top of the diaphragm. I just want you to also take note, I'll call these the cylinder head plates. There is cutouts in each plate assembly, and it actually goes over the boss of the in and out chamber, so they need to be in correct orientation. So we'll put the cutouts over the boss. We'll nip them up. So it's easier now to fill the cavity with oil. So very important, a 30 weight non-detergent oil. And we can basically nearly fill that all the way to the top. Just installing the last cylinder. So you often heard that saying, don't do as I do and do as I say. It's probably better to, or it is better to assemble each cylinder individually. Place the diaphragm on cylinder head and the cylinder head retaining plate, and then move on to the next. Do the two sides, leave the top till last near the oil cap, which will enable you to fill that particular cylinder. So just working on our last one. So that took a litre of oil in the top. Our poppets have fallen out, that's okay. The spigot allows the re-engagement of the cylinder head. Place that cylinder head in situ. Again, our last retaining plate. And with the cutouts in that retaining plate overlapping the lobes there. We can then re-engage the outer housing. And take note of what direction that does go in, your outlet and inlet to the oil filler gauge. We're nice and clean. The poppets are all seated, the sleeves are all seated. Just get this to sit evenly over the top like that. We heard that click. It would be reasonably hard to get this wrong. Got two different length bolts, longer on the outside and shorter on the inside. So could you do this in situ? A majority of it you can, so changing your poppets certainly can be done in situ. You could pull this housing out, change the poppets. if you had a pressure issue, but it's all quite easily managed, as you can see here, even on the bench. Grab a spanner, come back, check tighten all those, and put the regulator on. Don't over tighten. The same up here on the cylinder head. Should always do things in diagonals. Last of all, regulator. Nip those up. Oil top up. We'll do a final oil top up when we are installed in a level plane, to give you an understanding. You can see the oil, the air running out there, so it is quite hard to dispense that oil, but we know the pump's full, and we'll leave it there and do a final adjustment at the end. But the Comet P40, and as they used to say, if Bob's your uncle and Fanny's your aunt, this is diaphragm overhaul kit replacement. Check out all our other videos on YouTube under Blue Tongue Industries. Thanks for watching.